Thoughts on Dr. Manmohan Singh?
Well, Dr. Manmohan Singh, our Prime Minister for a decade, was a multifaceted genius, if I may say, not a practicing politician who came through the electoral processes of any particular party. He reached the position of Prime Minister of India not once but twice, and he brought to bear on his august office, such a vast area of experience, such a vast fund of knowledge in regard to practically every aspect of the governance of India. As we recollect, he started his career in the Ministry of Commerce. He was an advisor in the ministry. Later he became governor of the Reserve Bank of India. He became vice chairman of the Planning Commission. He became the finance minister, and subsequently he rose to the position of Prime Minister in the year 2004. So behind him was a wide experience of practically every aspect of the governance of India. He was keenly aware of the diversity of this country, of more than 1 billion people speaking different languages, practicing different religions, belonging to different castes. It's a great.
Yes, sir. Go on, sir. We can listen.
It's a vast fund of knowledge.
And may I request you to just turn the volume of your television down, because it is interrupting with the on-air broadcast. If there's a television on next to you. Yeah, go ahead, please, sir, now. Now I can hear you clearly, sir. Please go ahead.
So we are also aware that he was not an elected Prime Minister. He was himself fully conscious of that fact, and later people, particularly his critics, pointed that out as a weakness of the Prime Minister. Throughout his tenure of 10 years, at some time or the other, people used to raise that issue against him. And in spite of these taunts from different sections of society, particularly those who are not friendly with the dispensation at that given point of time, he did not bother too much about those voices of criticism or dissent. Once he made up his mind, based on the evidence that he could collect, based on the advice that he could get, once he decides and make up his mind on a course of action to be followed, with great determination, he pursued that. The Indo-US nuclear deal is a classic example and a crowning point of his success as Prime Minister. It was totally uncharted waters in the sense that Indo-US relations were not at the peak, at the best of times, but he struck a chord with the then President of the United States, George Bush, and between the two of them, they decided to go ahead with this nuclear deal. And perhaps George Bush was as much keen as Dr. Manmohan Singh was that this was in the interest of India, and this was also in the interest of the rest of the world. It was that conviction which led to Dr. Manmohan Singh staking even the future of his government on that deal. He was convinced that the nuclear deal would open up a huge area of developmental activities. It will prop up, particularly a country which was short of energy, and sources of energy were, other than the fossil fuel sources, there were no other source of energy was developed those days. We talk about future sources of energy at that time, but they were off top. So he was convinced that to meet the huge increasing demand for power in this country, nuclear energy was absolutely essential. And that, to my mind, was motivated him to go ahead at all risks with the Indo-US nuclear deal.
Mr. Nair, you came in contact, correct me if I'm wrong, even before he became Prime Minister, when he was the Governor RBI and you were in charge of a state Chief Secretary of one of the states in our country. How was Dr. Manmohan Singh in private? And then you went on to work with him very closely for nearly a decade. How was he in private? Was his public persona and private persona different, or was he the same?
He was just the same. Still, I remember the way he received me, talked to me, helped me at the state of Punjab in such, I don't know, in a way which no other politician could have done. I went to meet him because at that point of time in the license permit Raj for industry to come up and for financing of industry from outside sources, particularly from non-resident Punjabis who were willing to support the process of industrialization in Punjab. There were several impediments at that time. So my chief minister, Sardar Darbar Singh, if I remember correctly, asked me to go and call on Dr. Manmohan Singh and seek his advice, guidance and help. That's how I met Dr. Manmohan Singh in the RBI's office complex in New Delhi. And you believe me, I was just at that time maybe a level of a director or a joint secretary in the government of India. But the way he received me, the way he respected me, and the way he literally went out of his way to suggest ways and means of overcoming my problem, overcoming the problems of Punjab, still is green in my memory. And also, often, particularly when he used to see off his visitors in RCR as Prime Minister, I was reminded of the way he came up to the lift in the Reserve Bank building where he was staying to see me off with folded hands. That picture of humility, that picture of consideration, kindness, which I witnessed for the first time, is a lasting impression on me even today. And I was reminded of that many times when he used to see off his visitors at RCR at his office. So he was, he was a personification of humility. That is one of the greatest of, admirable characteristics that he maintained throughout his career. Whether he was Prime Minister or out of the Prime Minister's office, he maintained that attitude to other people. So, underlying that was consideration for other human beings, whether they are his equals or whether they are from different backgrounds. It did not make him any difference in his dealings with them. He was kind to them, he was appreciative of their concerns, and up to the point of even sometimes going out of his way, he tried to help people out. So that nature, perhaps not many people who knew him as a Prime Minister may be aware of it.
You worked very closely also with Mr. Atal Bihari Vajpayee. You actually worked closely with three Prime Ministers, Inder Kumar Gujral ji, Atal Bihari Vajpayee and also Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh. Would you want to compare them in terms of their attitude towards the country, service? What was similar between the two, especially Atalji and also Dr. Manmohan Singh? Because one followed the other.
Though I would not like to make a comparison which will not be fair, I can only say with total conviction that all the three of them had the good of the country in their mind, their own different perspective, their own view of looking at things. They all tried their very best to be of service to the country. India was uppermost in their minds, not their parties. And that, I think, was a feature which they shared.
Mr. Nair, how was Dr. Manmohan Singh? Was he equipoised during successes and in the glory moments? Because the latter part of his tenure, there were a lot of charges of corruption and multiple aspects and scams and investigations. How was he at that time? Was he sad about the way things were progressing? Did he ever share anything with you?
Well, definitely he was concerned about some of those, unsavory stories and developments. Although, his integrity is impeccable. Nobody can question his personal integrity, no questions. But still, stories about the so-called scams and misdeeds in government in different areas, they did cause him concern. But I don't think he was unduly worried about his future or the future of the country tied up to that. He was sorry that these controversies would impede to some extent the development of the country and the energy of the official machinery, the concentration of the official machinery, of the parliament and all the institutions together. Let's put it this way, that those controversies could have been avoided. He would have really definitely wished.
True. Mr. Nair, I was speaking with Mr. Dinesh Trivedi, and he believes that if there is someone who deserves to be the Bharat Ratna, it is Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh. Would you want to concur with him? And how would you remember Dr. Manmohan Singh?
Not only do I concur with him, I believe that government on its own will take the initiative and without any prodding from outside, confer him this honor. Definitely yes. He richly deserved that honor. He richly deserves this even in his death.
And how will you remember Dr. Manmohan Singh? Not just as a politician, but also as someone who was a co-worker, someone with whom you spent perhaps the prime of your bureaucratic career too.
As one of the most unassuming, helpful, lovable person, as I said, a personification of humility, which taught people around him also of the great virtue of humility, even though at times it may be misinterpreted, seen, perceived as a sign of weakness. It was certainly not a sign of weakness, it was a trait of his noble character. He was a noble politician. I don't think India has had any politician of that nobility. Certainly not, nobody comparable to him in that part of, or in that characteristic of a prime minister. We will get strong prime ministers, we will get prime ministers who are development oriented, and I believe that all the prime ministers that we will have in future too would have the good of India at their heart, and the process through which they come would also ensure that they are all pro-development, pro-people. But still, there is this little difference, as I can see it now from my experience, that he was such a noble person, nobility. Dr. Manmohan Singh was an avatar of nobility in public life.
Such glowing words, and what a wonderful tribute that you have paid TKA Nair ji. Pleasure speaking with you, and thank you for making the time with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.